Okay, we're preparing. So, Honey Bunch, can you tell me?
This meeting is being live streamed. Um,
And then we'll just do an official start.
Meeting is now streaming live on YouTube, it says.
All right, you guys excited?
And yep,
All
Trucker
right.
Convoy 2022,
Oh,
Charter of Rights Freedom. Um,
let
I'm
me
not getting a
mute.
visual yet, but it's.
I am.
Are you?
Okay, and I'm just a couple of seconds behind, it looks like. So I am going to just start. Okay, so hello, everyone, and welcome to a brand spanking new episode of Who Do You Think You Are? My name is Lasia Kahoot, and once again, as always, I'm here with my co-host on the show and in life, Mr. Glenn Sheridan.
Hello, all.
And today, not only do we have a super special guest, but we are doing two things differently today. One, we are actually live streaming for the very first time. Yay! And the other is that we have a returning guest for the very first time. So, as we get started, before I make introductions and stuff like that, I would just like to begin the show as we have started doing a few months ago to say thank you, thank you, thank you. We are so eternally grateful because we come to you from Saanich on Vancouver Island on the unceded lands of the Wasanich people. And we are so grateful to live and work and breathe and play on these amazing lands in these amazing times. So thank you. Now, once again, even though I have a bit of a delay here as I'm looking on YouTube, actually, I'm going to go back to Facebook. Okay, so here we go. I'm now back on Zoom, so I can see you guys, which is great. So today we welcome back philosophy student, psychology student, writer, editor, critical thinker extraordinaire, amazing friend of ours, someone that we are so excited to have back in the conversation, especially because as I was looking back into what was going on, I noticed that our last podcast, we did it just before the vaccine passports were mandated in BC. It was just before or just after I wrote my Value of Freedom piece that garnered the most attention out of any email I have ever sent out. And it was shortly after our guest, I'm just going to say her name right now, Ms. Emily Rodgers, had posted her first video on YouTube calling out our Prime Minister, saying enough kind of thing, and saying that really he should not be the leader of our country anymore because of decisions that were being made. And so here we are, what, 4 or 5 months later, freedom is still the big topic of the day. And especially today, which is January 29th, 2022, it is a huge day in Canada because today is the day that the Trucker Convoy for Freedom is converging in Ottawa from 3 different streams, I think, in Canada. It has been traveling across Canada from the West Coast for almost the entire week. And then there are truckers coming in from the East Coast. There are some Americans that have joined in. There are Americans who are parked at the border who are standing in solidarity. And this, for me, feels like a pivotal moment in our nation's history, in my lifetime anyway, because it feels like, Honey Bunch, what I was sort of saying to you when we were in Edmonton in August, all of these smaller hush hush conversations that were starting to build, that were kind of all over the place, all of these splinter groups that were doing things on their own, the bigger rallies that were starting to happen and pop up, the demonstrations that the first responders were making when they stood silently in front of Parliament buildings in Toronto, in Calgary, here in Victoria, perhaps somewhere else. I don't even know all of it. All of that now, because of this trucker convoy that is so visible that it cannot be ignored. It's as if, just like Rex Murphy said in his National Post piece a few days ago, it's as if it's a proxy or like a representation, and it's been, you know, the catalyst, the impetus for the convergence of all of these things to happen and come together as one unified voice where people are saying enough is enough. Enough with the lockdowns, enough with the mandates, enough with the masks. It's not even, you know, we want to get back to normal. It's just enough. Like, what is happening to this amazing country, this huge country? What is happening to the inalienable rights and freedoms that are ours just because we are, just because we exist and are outlined in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms? And just enough. So we're super excited today to go live, super excited to talk about this. The three of us listened to more than once the amazing, super important interview with Jordan Peterson and the Honorable Brian Peckford that was put out a couple of days ago. Brian Peckford being the last surviving member of the First Ministers who crafted the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. And he happens to be the keynote speaker today at the rally that's happening in Victoria at 12 noon in front of the legislature building there in support of the trucker convoy. So freedom is the topic, the word of the day. And we have talked about philosophical implications. We have talked about moral implications. None of us are lawyers, so it's not like we can, have any kind of authority to speak to legal implications. But I know there is an interesting conversation that continues. And so I'm just going to open it up to our guest, Emily, since she's our guest today, and see where are you with this, like from when you posted your first YouTube video a few months back calling out our prime minister to here we are today with this monumental event happening, right now as we speak. How do you feel today with what's going on in our country?
I feel absolutely the first thing I feel is relieved. I feel very relieved that I no longer feel like I'm screaming into the void. Mm-hmm. And that I'm, a crazy lady saying, hello, let's wake up here. I am, and the second thing I feel is just pride and connection that I haven't felt before COVID even, like there was an erosion of Canadian pride and connection, and obviously that worsened with COVID, but now it's like, this is the Canada that I always knew and always believed in and was always taught about. And, we are a nation of freedom. First and foremost, we're a nation of unity. We're a nation of peace. We're a nation of charity and coming together to support each other. And that's what we're seeing now. And so, if I look back at where I was 5 months ago when I posted that video where I'm just like, I can't believe that the people in charge of our country haven't thought about the implications that these policies will create. And it was like, I won't say I was afraid, but I was like shocked. And it's been, in these 5 months, it's been an emotional roller coaster. It's been up and down. It's been, there's been glimmers of hope when you see there's some people waking up, you see the media maybe being a bit more attentive to the other side of the story. And that gives you a bit of hope, but then that gets taken away when, these mandates in other provinces get extended. And so now it's just like, we're not alone. All this time, there were so many people who knew what was right and knew what was wrong. And it's an incredible feeling. It's just so amazing to be a part of.
Yeah, and so thank you for all of that. The words relief, pride, connection, freedom, unity, peace, charity, support, and right and wrong. And I just want to touch on the right and wrong part. And this comes from my being a student of metaphysics and philosophy and spirituality. And for much of my life, I was very much a sort of black and white thinker, two sides to every story. And then after working for several years and ultimately getting my bachelor's degree in advanced consciousness studies, just delving into quantum physics and seeing that there are infinite realities that are possible at any given moment, and that the one that we're experiencing, that we're creating, is because we're focusing on it. That's where we're putting our attention. And the idea of, what is true, what is right, what is good, that is there only one right, or is there only one truth, kind of thing. And so for me, it's I agree with everything that you say, and I also feel like, because there has been so much polarization, so much division, divisiveness over the last couple of years, that I don't know if I would use the word right, and I would use the word I'm saying me, not, and true, because I feel like what's right and what's true can I'm thinking of it in much more individual terms than I ever did before. And that was because it seemed like so many decisions that were made in the last 2 years were made for the greater good, for the collective, for the safety of the collective. And so many of those decisions have been at the expense of the individual. Without the individual, there is no collective. And so the questions, that we would ask, or that, that I've been thinking about, that I know we've been thinking, because we've talked about it, is, is one person's health more valuable, over another? If a decision that is made, is that what it shows? Is that what it indicates, that you're more important or you're more valuable than, someone else, just because you choose to comply, or you choose to follow, or you don't, kind of thing. And the thing that kind of gets me is that, and this was something that I learned very recently, and it was even talked about in the Jordan Peterson and Brian Peckford interview, is that these decisions that were made by various levels of government were not based on the science. And there is no the science. There's science, there's exploration, there's questioning, there's investigation. There's no one definitive thing that is, the end all and be all. It's continually being questioned and investigated into. But that wasn't the foundation for the decisions, for the protocols, for the mandates. It was very targeted public opinion poll, and not parliamentary process. And for me, that is mind-blowing. I mean, it's mind-blowing to me that when there's an election happening in the country, this vast country where there are several time zones that span the country, that when, what is it, in Eastern Canada, when they're closed, they're already reporting on it when people in Western Canada and the prairies haven't even voted yet. How does that not influence, what's happening in the rest of the country? How are people supposed to make, an informed opinion on their own sort of merit, using their own minds? So that would get me every single time. So when I found out, that this is what was happening here, it blew my mind. I can't say it surprised me completely, but I don't get it. And for me, the question that keeps coming to mind is, to what end? Why would you skirt around and sort of, why wouldn't you follow, the proper procedures, the proper process to make these decisions? When listening to Brian Peckford, talk about, how they could have made decisions by making sure that the vulnerable were protected initially, and then see, sort of investigate that, and for 30 days, get some committees together and whatever, and see, okay, so this is what happened with this is what we did with this, now let's move forward and make a plan, for the rest of the country, or the next level of people that need help, rather than just sort of this blanket of, we're locking down everyone, we're doing, we're instituting these protocols and mandates for everyone, when it was all based on opinion poll, and not any actual science there. So for me, but going back to the idea of right, I guess I don't know if what's right for me is necessarily right for everyone, but I think there is a fundamental way to behave. There are procedures and processes that are in place already, and just hearing, one of the people who crafted this Charter of Rights and Freedoms speak to the processes that are available and that this is what these sections of the charter mean, and that the very first one is the one that this whole sort of, last 2 years is based on, that the government could just go, no, we can do whatever we want according to section 1 of that charter, when really, if it were put to the test, and according to the Honorable Brian Peckford, it is being put to the test, there was no foundation, because it wasn't a time of peril. We weren't at war. There wasn't insurgents, happening. And so to use that first section as the foundation to justify the decision making that's happened, is just horrific, unconscionable, mind-blowing, bizarre, just, Twilight Zoney, whatever. So that's kind of where I am right now. And I am with you though, like relieved, feel very proud when watching finally a segment on Global News, showing Toronto, where Glenn and I moved from recently, and seeing people on the various bridges over the 401 with hockey sticks and Canadian flags tied to them, and just thousands of people lining up and supporting these truckers as they're making their way to Ottawa to fight for their freedom and their right to choose, and to not be forced to vaccinate or to show proof of vaccination either way, just so they can do their job, so they can, continue carrying the supplies that we all use, for our daily lives. Incredible. Absolutely incredible, inspirational, and activational right now too, because I think it just like it's riling people up. It's getting people, to stand up and voice their truth, and so I think it's so exciting and such an amazing time to be alive and aware. Honey
Definitely.
Bunch, do you want to jump in?
Emily wants to jump in again.
Okay.
No, go ahead.
No, we were talking a little bit before we started recording about Emily having freedom brain, just this feeling that has overcome us in the last few days. And there's been a bit of a shift in the psychic weather, the consciousness of the earth, whatever's going on, because clearly if these things are happening, like you can go, there's lists of all these other countries where they're using us as a template, and they're truckers in Finland and in Portugal, and you name it. It's just happening in most Western countries, I guess. To see that as like a release valve of all this pressure that's built up, and the fact that it's happening, and it's, except for most of Canada not being able to see it because it's not on the CBC or whatever, until it actually hit Ottawa. I was watching it a little bit this morning, but the fact that it's happening in sort of the middle of winter, so it's like, could anything be more Canadian? It's like people out, there's there's just steam coming off their breath. They're walking around, and then the trucks are going by, and the support on the bridges, on the sides of roads, people taking their families, little kids just playing in the snow a little bit, but like cheering people on, and kids sending messages through the CBC or the CB radio channel, the Convoy radio channel. It's just like inspiring and uplifting, and it's an acknowledgement of enough time has gone by that people have looked at the people who came up with the plans regionally and nationally and realized, like, is this the best you have? Like, really, are we going to keep doing this? Like, are we going to keep hammering away at the same message and insisting that we need to all fall in line in order to keep everyone safe? But the thing is, they're not mentioning, it's like around this one issue. And when you have all this splintering going on of people looking over there, last night I finished watching the Netflix movie Don't Look Up the other day, and it's very cartoonish in the way it's presented, but like, you get the crowd of people who like they actually say don't look up, like ignore, there's nothing up there, there's no comet coming and stuff. But like, and then finally one guy's like noticing, like, you guys lied to us. But in this case, the the realization I think for some people is that you know there are some physical results that have happened for people who at various stages of vaccination, whether it's once, twice, or the booster. You get people reacting to it because you will in clinical trials, and we're still in this clinical trial, no matter what they're saying. But the other thing is just those hidden elements of, you know, teen depression, and you know, even older people just like being fed up they can't visit their family, and they're in their waning years, and it's like, what is that doing to the mind of people in all across the world, but we'll say Canada. And we have a teenage daughter. I have two older kids. But like, what is it doing to people? This eternal lockdown nonsense. That it serves no purpose in the end, because it's still we're still reacting to what happened 2 years ago. So come March 2022, it'll be essentially 2 years for most countries. And as Brian Peckford was pointing out, it's like he was watching it for the first 90 days of this thing happening, both in personal terms, like, well, we should really be, on high alert, like, how is this going to affect us? But also zoom out and look at the bigger picture, and it's like, are the measures being taken, are they appropriate to the threat? Because there's other things going on. There are children whose development, in speech and in understanding, empathy, and things like that, they're being affected. And we won't know for 2 decades necessarily how does that affect their lives, and those of their families. So people are realizing this, and my rant is over. That's enough. We've got other things. We've got to get on with our lives, and the economy's taking huge hits, and printing all this money to make the problem go away so that you can appear like you're doing something. People are realizing, no, like, enough. We're not children. So let's have another plan, or you guys, you've got to go. And there'll be new parties, as Brian Peckford was saying. There'll be new parties, or there'll be gutting of the existing political systems, and there's got to be something new.
Okay, so I just want to interject here for a moment, because I am looking on YouTube and I see that there are a few people watching. So I just wanted to say hello. Thank you. I don't know if this is our first time streaming live, so I don't know if we'll figure out how to interact with you.
And if you turned off during my rant, I'm sorry. Give us another chance.
But I just wanted to also just let people know, because I don't know when they tuned in, is that we're talking freedom, we're talking Trucker Convoy 2022, and we're talking Charter of Rights and Freedoms today. And we are referencing, among other things, the interview with Jordan Peterson and the Honorable Brian Peckford that was aired a couple of days ago, where they discussed the Charter of Rights and Freedoms and a few sections in particular, and how they pertain to what has been going on, the COVID response over the last 2 years. And so that's part of what Glenn was just referring to just now. And Honey Munch, I don't think you have to say, rant over. And I know you started talking about vaccines, and there are, VAERS reports and the equivalent thereof in other countries that show the symptoms and adverse reactions and the extent of them, what they are and how many there have been in relation to all other vaccines, combined over the last 30 years or whatever. But the thing that really is the issue at hand is the mandates, and just, is does the government have the right to impose these mandates, to impose these lockdowns, to impose, the wearing of the mask? Like, do they have the grounds for this? And according to Mr. Brian Peckford, who is the last surviving member of the first ministers who crafted that Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, he's saying no, they don't, just because the very first section doesn't hold water or the argument doesn't hold water based on the first section. So, just I am so excited still. I'm so excited to just be here today. I'm so excited to have the opportunity to go down to the We Unify, I think it's We Unify Canada, We Unify rally that's happening in Victoria at noon today in front of the legislature in support of the trucker convoy. And I'm so looking forward to hearing what Mr. Peckford has to say, because he's the keynote speaker today. And just to hear, that, it was really interesting when we were listening to that interview to hear, and I kind of remembered this, but it sort of put it out of my head, that, in 1981, when this was happening, the Prime Minister Elliott Trudeau at the time, that he wanted to do things his way, and that he went and he crafted his own version, and the court said
of the charter,
yeah, you can't do that. And so his, wasn't accepted. And I just think, isn't that interesting how, here we are today, we have another Trudeau, in government as the prime minister, and look at what's happening, with his decisions. And I know decisions aren't being made unilaterally by individuals, that there are, groups and collectives, even though it's not the parliamentary process that is taking place in that decision making. But I gotta say, like having, Trudeau as prime minister right now, the comments that he has made about people who do not go along with the narrative that is being espoused by mainstream media, by various levels of government, and then being in a province where we have a public health officer who has pretty much exclusive authority to do and say whatever it is she feels necessary. For me, that feels like that's a whole lot of power for one person to have. Where's the questioning? Where's the opportunity to challenge and go, hey, wait a minute, maybe that's not such a great decision. Maybe there's another way to do this. And I think, today is the day that is a symbol of that questioning. And there are other ways to do this. And like Glenn said, the way that we're responding right now, it's to something that happened 2 years ago. And there's been no sort of evolution or development or looking into, how else can we approach this, because this hasn't been working well the way we thought it would. Any comments there?
Yeah, and that's what you're talking about. What you were just talking about before was about the lack of opposition, the lack of, okay, wait, but what are the consequences? And that opposition voice has been absent this entire time. We don't have a strong, loyal opposition in Parliament or in any of the provincial legislatures, it appears to be. And this was something very, very important that Brian Peckford touched on in the interview with Jordan Peterson, which was he made it clear that when they crafted the Charter of Rights and Freedoms and they put in Section 1, which for people who don't know, Section 1 of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms basically says in all of the following rights and freedoms are inalienable and guaranteed unless there is an extreme, I forget the wording, but unless there is an extreme circumstance in which the government can decide to override the rest of the rights and freedoms. But the ability to implement Section 1 has to meet certain tests.
Mm-hmm.
And a strong opposition needs to be one of those tests. So there needs to be a cost benefit analysis done. There needs to be committees formed where they debate whether it's right to override the rest of the rights and freedoms. And that just, I mean, it didn't happen. It did not happen at all. And that's what my video was. That's what I was trying to say without like saying it, because I didn't want to get censored and all that. But I was saying, like, this hasn't been thought through. There hasn't been a cost benefit analysis done, because I know that, like, section 1 of the charter isn't just some carte blanche to, throw away our constitution.
Mm-hmm.
That's why it's number 1.
Yeah.
Is because it's so important to use it in an intelligent, thoughtful, lawful way. And it hasn't been. So Brian Peckford is launching his lawsuit against the federal government for infringement on Section 6 of the Charter, which is the freedom of mobility. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, he said, there's a whole basket of things that this lawsuit could have been based on. The erosion of freedom of speech is a huge one. That's a major implication that has come out of these mandates, is that, freedom of speech is being eroded entirely. There's no opposition. There's no room for dissenting opinion or view. But freedom of mobility is the one that he launched his lawsuit on. And that's obviously due to the travel restrictions.
Yeah.
And I think that's a smart play. Like, obviously he's an incredibly intelligent, astute man. And yeah, I think that I'm so interested to see where it goes. But yeah, I think it's really important that people understand, all Canadians look into the charter and, let's educate ourselves on how it actually works. Like, for so long, we've thought, many of us who have looked into it thought that Section 1 was, just some, like I said, like carte blanche to do away with our rights and freedoms, but it's not. There are very important tests that must be met. Yeah.
Yeah, Honey Much, can I just say, we may be want to say the same thing, I don't know, but there's 2 things that come up there for me when you talk about that. And the first thing is that in the interview, not only did he talk about how important that first section is and those 4 tests that need to be the criteria that, before it meets the, yeah, okay, we can, supersede it or override it. He said all of that, all the sections are only valid because of the preamble to those sections that begins whereas and then talks about and I can't remember.
I can read it. It's
okay, thank you.
Whereas Canada is founded upon principles that recognize the supremacy of God and the rule of law, and then it gets into the guarantee of rights and freedoms.
Okay, so for me, that was incredibly exciting as a student of metaphysics and consciousness and spirituality, because even though I know that the word God could be a bit triggering or uncomfortable, or some people might be like, yeah, whatever, I don't even believe in God. For me, what that beginning says, and Brian Peckford, touched on this, is that we have these rights and freedoms exist inalienably. They are because we are, it's part and parcel of who we are because we exist. That's it. It's not something that we need to earn. It's not something that we need to attain, that we need to work towards. They exist, period, because we exist. And then there's the rule of law, in addition to that. And so that's why all of those, this is why they sort of are held in place. And for me, that just gave me goosebumps, because to me, it was just, it's beyond, it almost goes back to what you were saying at the beginning, that I kind of said, well, I don't know if I would say it that way, but when you were talking about rightness, or you didn't say truth, I said truth. But this is just, it just is, and to know that you have this, that we have these rights and freedoms without having to work for them, without having to study for them, go to school for them, whatever, that they're there for us. And then to have them identified and written in stone, if you will, in the charter, that to me is a profound thing. And based on that alone, it's being abused and twisted and, sort of like, what is it, sort of bent, seemingly bent to the whim of those in government, who have been putting forth these policies, implementing these policies. So that first line, the whereas line, and then the four tests that you mentioned, that the first section has to kind of go through before a decision can be made that yes, okay, we can override the charter. You're like you said, it didn't happen. And so there's no foundation. There's no foundation for any of these decisions on any level of government that has been made. And the fact that nobody has been allowed to voice their opinion vocally, confidently, to the point of, okay, let's have a conversation. That's unconscionable.
Yeah, it is.
Now, the other thing that I wanted to say was the freedom of movement. Another conversation with my mom, who may or may not one day listen to any of these podcasts, but we had a very heartfelt conversation when she was here from Edmonton over Christmas about what a passport entitles you to do, and without it, how you can't. And so she was talking about how for her, it was very important. Because for her, it meant she could come here and visit us from Edmonton and spend Christmas with us. It meant that she could go out to dinner with her nephew and, spend time with him, who she doesn't get to see very often because they live in different cities, and something else. And I, I hear that, I get that, and for me, what came up was like, well, then can you understand how incredibly hard it is for us as parents to really consider the fact that we may not attend our kids' grade 12 graduation, which is an amazing accomplishment and rite of passage, if these passport mandates are still in place and the venue where the graduation takes place, enforces those mandates. Like, can you see what a hard decision that is for us as parents? Emily, you're gonna make me cry.
I know, that's why I'm not looking at you.
And then Glenn said something very important, which speaks to what I just said about, that preamble to the Charter of Rights. So Honey Bunch, do you remember what you said to my mom?
No, was it that these are things we have given up already? Is that
yeah, that we had them in the first place.
Yeah.
It's not that the passports are allowing us anything new. These were all in place before, and they're all in place because of who we are, because we exist in this amazing country, on this earth, in this time. So,
yeah. And this is another huge point, is that, like, philosophically speaking, if a thing like a vaccine or a therapy or a treatment does not itself have enough merit that its merits stand for itself, and then you need to apply a layer of coercion over top of it, like it's a fallacy to think that, like, the vaccine is good because it gives me my freedoms back. The vaccine has nothing to do with you getting your freedoms back. The vaccine should have merit in and of itself. Mm-hmm. You shouldn't need to apply another layer of promotion or market, is essentially like aggressive marketing, over top of it. It should sell itself. And it didn't for a lot of people. And so now people went and took it, not for its own merits, not because they thought that it in and of itself would be beneficial to them, but because there was another reason outside of the merits of the vaccine itself. And that, philosophically speaking, is a fallacy, and it's a bad way to build an argument. And it's ridiculous. But unless you think about it, people just, of course, they'll just do anything. They'll do it to get their freedom back.
Yeah. Now that being said, I mean, I can totally see why people would do it. I can totally see why people would do it, so that they can travel, why people would do it so that they can go partake in whatever it is that you can partake in with a passport that you're not allowed to do if you don't show the passport. I get it. Like, I really, really get it. However, for me, there is still something deep within my soul, in my core, that says it's wrong. It is wrong because it separates people, it segregates people, it basically makes, haves and have-nots, and it is a very slippery slope. If this becomes, like, already there's so many steps, and layers that have taken place over the last 2 years that we've said, okay, well, then there's this, okay, well, because always there's been the carrot of, and then we'll get back to normal. 2 weeks at the beginning of 2 years ago, we're going to lock down for 2 weeks and then we'll get back to normal. Okay, we're going to start where it would be great if you wore a mask, but you don't have to. And then we're going to get back to normal. Now everybody has to wear a mask for a certain amount of time, but then we'll get back to normal. Okay, now you got to get a second, vaccine, and then fine, we'll get back. Like the goalpost, we're back to normal has been being moved again and again and again and again. And there have been more impositions, implemented and mandated slowly over time. And it hasn't even been that much time. When does it end? And hearing, in that Jordan Peterson, Brian Peckford interview with the person that Jordan Peterson spoke to, who works in the government,
Ontario provincial government,
there is no end in sight. The WHO is working on vaccinations and related things till 2035, I think, without an end in sight. To what end? Like, what is the end game here?
We're just seeing this elaborate system of sticks and carrots being set up in real time, in reactivity to how the public responds to them. That's what's going on. It's just, okay, here's your carrot, and then they see how people react. Oh no, here's your stick. Here's the stick. You got to put the masks back on. Okay, let's see how people react. Oh, they're just constantly gauging. It's like a psyop. They're gauging how we are reacting in real time, and they're formulating their policy in real time based on how we reacted to the previous measure. And there is no end game. Like, we're asking, where's the end game? There isn't one. It doesn't exist because it's not that kind of thing. This thing it's a real-time update. There is no plan.
Well, and for me, from a spiritual perspective, and this is one of the biggest challenges that I keep coming up against, is that where I come from, everything that I believe and that I study and that I'm immersed in is founded on, there is only one thing going on. Call it energy, call it source, universe, God, creator, love, light, beauty, whatever you want to call it, whatever works for you. One thing. Everyone and everything is that thing in its entirety. You're not a part of, it's not separate from you. We're all interconnected, expressing as individual, unique, original expressions of this one incredible, profound, constantly expanding, constantly creating, evolving thing. So we're not separate. We are already one cohesive thing, just expressing differently, which means then that so is COVID. And so to think that it is something separate from us, something that is attacking us, something that is coming from the outside, that does not compute for me. And so instead of seeing COVID as this evil, maybe manufactured thing that was unleashed into society that is a threat to our very existence. I have been trying to come at it, and I have gone through like my own stuff, over the last 2 years. I am thinking very differently today than I was 2 years ago when this first started and when our state of emergency came into effect in March, in 2020. That there to see, first of all, how am I responding? What am I putting my attention and energy, and what am I focusing on? And that this isn't something separate from me. That the COVID experience, the unfoldment of COVID, I am just as much responsible for my experience of it, as is sort of what I'm seeing around me, because everything is being filtered through my own personal lens of worldview and beliefs. I choose to focus on where's the good, where's the new, where's the questioning, where's the fact that I don't know if this is the case anymore because this new variant is so contagious and it's just out there, and everybody and his dog seems to be getting at least a cold. Maybe it's Omicron, maybe it isn't, who knows? But there was a time until recently where you could say that most people had not had COVID. And out of the people who had, oh my God, I just lost the word. Out of all the people who'd had it, most of them had
comorbidities.
Delta?
It's, I don't want to say survived, gotten better. What's
Recovered.
Recovered, thank you.
Yeah.
Oh my God. And yes, a lot of the people who did die, comorbidity, was definitely a thing. But the point is that all that's being, like espoused through the media, or not all of it, a lot of, what the media has been talking about and the governments is sickness, 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 death, death, death,
Yeah.
rising number of cases exploding, hospitals, like overflowing, but there's no context. There's no context, like how many people in the hospitals are there just to get a test? How many people in the hospitals are there because of some other reason, but then COVID shows up, because they've been tested or some screen or whatever sort of thing? How many other people, are in the hospital to begin with a slate of other issues, and then end up contracting COVID, or COVID just like it's there, but they don't actually have it, like the molecule is present, but they don't actually have any symptoms or anything like that. And then the whole thing of hospitals overflowing because the staff, like there isn't enough staff. Well, how many people left? How many people left because they were so overworked? How many people left because they had to make a choice between keeping their job or taking a vaccine that they saw wasn't working, they didn't believe in, because they stood on principle? Like there was no context. And then there's tons of stuff that has come out with, this photo was used in this country, in this country, in this country, to talk about different hospitals and whatever. So there's that kind of conspiratorial thinking. But it all comes back down to, for me, of there's no separation. And so what am I choosing to focus on? What am I choosing to create? Knowing that there have been millions of people who've been sick. There have been so many people who have died. I know that's happened. I'm not dispelling that. I'm not dismissing it. I'm not saying it didn't happen. But I'm choosing to focus on so many other things. And so that's kind of where I am with this right now.
Yeah.
Who else?
Well,
Glenn?
yeah, as you're saying there, the thing that I agree with you, Lass, the thing that, the question that comes to mind, not just in this situation, but in so many where there's challenge and there's frustration or despair or whatever, when it involves people and institutional structures and that kind of thing outside of my own body, I still have to remind myself the question, like, who governs me? Like, who's in control of my experience?
Mhm.
And it's still ultimately me. And then the next question is, well, then how do I alter it to a new in a new direction where I begin to experience something something approaching you know, something that's more fulfilling of my values, something that challenges me to grow. So I'm not just, you know, happy. It's I'm made more resilient by my ability to encounter difficulties and challenges, and you know, whether it's get a thicker skin in some ways, or whether it's um, let stuff go, breeze past me, so that I know that, you know, not every fight is my fight. You know,
Mm-hmm.
the wind's changing all the time, so things are coming from different directions. But we do have that ability to just to know that, like, you know, we have this divinity within us that is making us capable of handling things like these challenges, you know. And that could be, you know, that could be an argument with someone, that could be um, something going on at work or whatever, or a health concern, or who knows, right? But in this case, it's very easy to, as we've all done at some point, maybe even in this conversation, to talk about they. But like, yeah, there's a they, but they are a reflection of who we are. So
Yeah.
that it comes back to, again and again, who am I? You know, who do you think you are? Who am I? Um, and what am I capable of? You know, and most of the things, like when we're looking at um, people to inspire us, you know, that you discover people on YouTube or whatever, like Jordan Peterson has interviewed some amazing people, and even things that he writes, or whether it's stuff from scripture or something that's um, coming from a different direction you're not even that familiar with. It There's all these little clues and hints to get you back into alignment of, like, okay, take a breath. You know, it's I am. You know, that's what it comes down to. I am. So, what are you going to follow that with? I am what?
Mm-hmm.
And right now, what's going on is for me, there's a good feeling of I'm I am in control of my own emotions, and you know that that's what is that, the trivium thing? You know, I think, I feel, I act. Those are in balance for me right now, because there's a feeling of,
Mm-hmm.
like, we we are capable of doing anything. So be mindful of that, and don't focus your energy on things to unnecessarily worry about. Drag your attention back to things that you can be grateful for. And I do feel grateful. And it's easier to feel gratitude when this shift is becoming more apparent. So maybe I'm cheating by saying, "Oh, this is a good time to bring this up." But I do honestly feel that, yeah, there's been a shift, and we're gonna go with be around some people today, and like absorb that energy and share our own energy with them, and like feel positive and feel that, yeah, there's something meaningful happening. And I'm aware that I'm in resonance with people all around the world who are screaming in, you know, the square in Turin or in Rio or whatever. It's like they're yelling their kind of I amness, you know, like, I'm here, I'm in charge of who I am, and what you're selling back to me as some cheap version of what I'm entitled to, I'm not buying it, you know, because I don't need to, because I'm making my own thing all the time, you know. So that's where I am.
Very
Yeah,
well
and
said.
I think I love what you just said, because to me, as you were talking about that, I was thinking back to, I think it was Rex Murphy's piece in the National Post a few days ago, where I think it was he who said, the trucker convoy is not a cause, it's an effect of what has been happening and building and percolating for these last 2 years. And as I'm thinking about that and listening to you, the shift in consciousness has been rising, and it's converging. And so to me, it kind of makes me think of practice, like for these, like the more you practice, the better you get at whatever it is. And so there have been these, like, people have been practicing knowingly, unknowingly, through conversation, through gathering, through the rallies, through writing their MLAs, through whatever actions, even just thinking and questioning.
Prayer,
that,
yeah.
yeah, that practice has been happening, and it's been slowly but surely expanding, up leveling, to the point where there is this convergence happening right now in our country, which is coinciding with things happening in other countries around the world. And that voice is becoming unified, more representative of who we truly are. And it's taken some time, but I don't think there's any cheating going on. I think it is so strong and palpable right now, and so beautifully and amazingly exemplified through this trucker convoy that is converging in Ottawa. um it's just, it is so exciting, and it can't be ignored. Like, there was that, I think, I don't know, honey bunch, if it was you who sent me the tweet of someone capturing a CBC journalist and camera person setting up at one of the stops along the convoy and shooting in the opposite direction. Yeah. And the person who's filming is like, this is what CBC is showing you. This is what's really going on. And that also is a symbol of, what has been happening on many, many levels over the last couple of years.
The before you jump in there, and please do, Emily. Lassie, can I share something? Just the Lynn McTaggart thing?
Yeah.
Just from her blog.
Yeah. You can share. I think you can share.
Screen. Okay.
Yep. Yeah, that was amazing. And your caption was even better.
Oh yeah. So this is,
scroll up a bit.
Yeah. So this is from the author of the book, The Intention Experiment and the Power of Eight.
And the field.
It says, keep on trucking together. This is from her blog. And it gives you a little snapshot of the story. If you doubt your own power as a single individual to make a giant difference to the state of the world today, take a look at what a group of truck drivers have managed to achieve. And then, you can go to that. We'll try and put the link in the description.
Yeah, we'll put the link in the...
and then there's pointing out that there's other convoys forming all over the world. And it's nice to have that sort of validation from someone who has studied the power of people coming together, even remotely. They're not in the same physical space necessarily, and what they focus on and how they can help heal one another. It's fantastic stuff, I think what was my thing? The power of 18-wheelers. That's what I wrote.
Yeah. Because her thing is the power of 8.
Yeah.
And so, yes, then Glenn went, the power of 18-wheeler.
That's clever.
So I'll stop sharing. So, how do I stop? So, and then of course there's the other, what do you call it? Did I lose Lasia?
No, I'm here.
Then there's, Elon Musk saying Canadian truckers rule, and, Russell Brand and all these people. And like
Joe Rogan.
Who?
Joe Rogan.
Oh,
Joe Rogan.
Yeah. I heard he was the devil. Did you hear that? Yeah.
Yeah. I heard he's alt-right, white nationalist.
Yeah, there was a funny thing on I think it was Jimmy Dore's show, where, I mean, he took a little bit of a cheap shot at to some extent at Neil Young doing this, like this ultimatum, either Spotify gets my music or they get Joe Rogan. They can't have both. And then they ended up pulling the music. But the irony is he sold most of his music a few years ago, and the people who now own it are, I think, Blackstone, like bought the company that bought his songs, Hypnosis Songs. And Blackstone is one of those companies that is, notorious for being, um, negatively affecting real estate, and they own pharma companies and this kind of thing. So the whole idea of like Neil Young's singing that song, was it "This Note's for You," and then there's, I ain't singing for Miller, I ain't singing for Coke, I ain't singing for nobody. It makes me look like a joke. Well, somebody else now owns his songs, and so like also, does it really matter, in the end? Because those platforms, I mean, most people don't like the idea that their songs are being played, and they get very few royalties anyway. So they were complaining about that for a few years, until a few years ago.
Yeah.
It's just a weird situation. So
Yeah, but the with Joe Rogan, the he has had so many people on his platform who otherwise wouldn't have had a platform. They're the ones that are being censored, right?
Yeah.
And so I know that we Lassie, you mentioned that we might want to talk about this, the mass formation psychosis, or the parasitic mind kind of thing.
Oh, Watiko. Yeah.
Watiko.
Right. Yep.
So that's a good thing to bring up here, because Paul, what's his name? Malone, Dr. Robert Malone, and Dr. Peter McCullough were on Joe Rogan's shows, and they mentioned this mass formation psychosis, which you might think of something similar to the Watiko, or a parasitic mind, a mind virus, all of these different types of metaphors, and illustrations of what that might look like. That you were saying Rex Murphy said that the convoy is an effect of a cause. What you might want to look at is how this unity consciousness we're seeing now is the effect of the mass formation psychosis. So just as a mass formation psychosis is like this, we would think of it in like negative terms, like it's like a mind virus, it's an oppressive, parasitic mentality.
Yeah.
Well, what's the equal and opposite reaction to that?
Mm-hmm.
An amazing up leveling of unity consciousness now. So it's like all of these things are clicking, and we're seeing all of this happen now. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, it's, and kind of, it's so easy to just bring it back to philosophy.
Yeah.
Because that's where it's okay to ask questions. Like,
Yeah.
it's okay to just pick at things and tear them apart and investigate and wonder and be curious. And I just like, I love living, in that space. And so, it's so interesting to think that way. And for me, it just, kind of keeps coming back to, because this is what was there all along. And so this up leveling of consciousness, this awakening, from the dream, as Paul Levy would say, author of the Quantum Revelation, and, who has written books on Watiko, has a new book out. This to me is what is happening. And I don't want to sort of just, I don't want to dismiss what people have been feeling, what they have been going through, what they have been navigating, because it all feels so real, and it all requires attention and tender loving care and focus. It's just, here's an opportunity to really open up, your heart, your mind, your soul, your eyes, your ears, everything, because there's a different way to look at things, and the way that, is sort of revealing itself right now is something that has been there all along. And so it's what's the cause, what's the effect? It's a continual sort of like circle, because there's always expansion and creativity happening and in play, always. So it's kind of chicken egg syndrome, but yeah, I mean, it's, I agree with you. And I'm so excited to see that this is happening right now. And, you know, again, going back to sort of, you know, relief and pride and connection, and Glenn mentioning the word resilience, I think is so important. Oh, Glenn's saying that we have a few YouTube comments. So yeah, so resilience. I'm really glad that Glenn brought that up, because right now, I think, is a testament to each individual's, you know, resilience, that is just the divine essence of who and what we are, and then our collective resilience that is being represented and exemplified by this, you know, Trucker Convoy 2022. Honey Bunch, do you want to read off some comments, because I don't have it in front of me.
Yeah. So principally, it was thank you for your comments and watching. Person's name is Ginny Out the Bottle, as in Genie Out the Bottle, maybe. Ginny Out the Bottle. Hello. Something that has affected every single person in Canada. A very unifying display, love. Very sad to see so many people attempting to discredit and devalue the central message, freedom for all. Then the children suffer the most. She's probably commenting as we're saying certain things.
Right.
So I just thanked her for her comments. And then freedom of expression, in quotes, a tragedy that our Canadian authors didn't have the same insight hunch as the founding fathers of the USA. Our right is not all encompassing and seems weaker in this modern world. Then we have a comment from Kieran Donahue. I've seen people dying of COVID. It's real. And then a response actually from Ginny. Kieran Donahue, of course, virus and virus response are not being conflated here. And he replies, didn't know. Seems like everything comes down to experiential relevancy. Whose experience is relevant? Well, maybe Emily might have a comment on that. I don't know. But yeah, so thank you for being part of the conversation.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, yeah. Did you want to comment on that, Emily?
Experiential relevancy. So yeah, I'm hearing, you know, subjective consciousness, subjective reality, personal experience. Yeah, and I think a lot of the discussion around the pandemic has been I wrote a thing about how there's this merge and diverge strategy going on with the narrative, or the people that control the narrative around COVID. And what that consists of is a conflation. We're conflating a lot of things that are actually separate, and we're false dichotomizing a lot of things that are much more nuanced than people are looking at it through a lens of black and white, right? And it's not, you know, if you're objectively looking at the issue, you're not going to be saying, you know, well, this family's story of their grandmother passing away from COVID is less important than, you know, this family whose 18-year-old child now has a vaccine injury. You know, if you're in an objective space, if you're in a space where you're not conflating and you're not false dichotomizing, you're not thinking of it from the merge and diverge strategy, yeah, you're obviously going to have as much compassion for a family with this experience as you would with a family with this experience. That's these different experiences are still equally valid and equally real, and their testimonies are equally powerful. So yeah, we don't want to discount or discredit anyone's experience, but that's part of this whole thing, is pitting the two types of experiences against each other, when we don't need to be doing that.
You know, and what you were talking about, subjective versus objective. There is no objectivity there. Like, we all have our belief systems, we all have our worldviews, and no matter how objectively we try to view something, as soon as we start thinking, our thinking is filtered through those beliefs. And so it's like how, it's such an interesting question or comment that this person posed, because everything, our reality is completely subjective. I mean, we're creating it filtered or, based on our own beliefs. That being said, I think that it is still, especially with what I'm immersed in, otherwise I wouldn't be immersed in spiritual and consciousness studies, for this long, to become more aware that that is what's happening. And that is, as we become more aware, where we can be more compassionate, to everyone and everything. And it's not about, even the person that disagrees, with you, to be able to, you were talking earlier about opposition and how important it is. And so, to be able to have conversations with people that disagree, like vehemently disagree, are in disagreement, and to be able to listen so that we can better understand, why someone believes what they believe, and to not necessarily convince one another of thinking differently, but just to understand better so that we can move forward, in disagreement, if that is the way it's going to be, but still with mutual respect and understanding and maybe even compassion for one another. And that can happen here. I feel like that is happening. I mean, that if we kind of take it back to the vaccine versus no vaccine, there are plenty of people who are vaccinated who also oppose the mandates, like because they have their views and their opinions and stuff. But it's not just if you're not vaccinated, you're against the passport mandates. It's not as simple and black and white as that. Very layered, very, intermingled there.
Yeah, and the I'll just give like a psychological perspective, like from a psychotherapeutic standpoint, like opening yourself up to diverse opinions and willing to enter into the arena and have these hard discussions on these contentious issues, that produces psychological resilience, to use Glenn's term. That is what creates a mental strength. So yeah, psychologically speaking, this is something that whether we like it or not, we have been thrust into, our world has been thrust into this conversation. And what we can take away from it, if we are willing and we're open to it, is a new resilience that I can have conversations with people with whom I disagree. I can be open to hearing other points of view and not take it as a personal affront to my identity.
Yeah.
These are very, very important psychological skills to build, for personal self-esteem and for societal cooperation. So we just, like, it's very important to be open to hearing all sorts of views, for your own well-being and for society's well-being.
Yeah, and that goes back to, I think it was Jordan Peterson breaking down the idea of what Parliament is. That it's a place of thinking, and it's a place of discussing, ideas and hashing them out, so that and sometimes it goes into committees and this kind of thing before you even get to something that would be approaching, okay, we'll allow this to come into law. However, we on this side of the aisle have indicated or isolated things that we're absolutely not okay with, as in they're going to whittle down this original plan or bill, and we're going to make these changes, and then we bring it back, and then if the people who propose the bill are okay with it going forward, then eventually, if it gets passed, then it would go to committee for regulations and this kind of thing. So there's always input, and what has happened, it seems, is that that whole notion of sharing ideas and being, you know, being very strong and vocal in your own sort of commitment to being part of the, you know, the community, or in this case, they are there to represent the people that they voted them in, right? So we right now are in a minority parliament again, right? Because even after the election, Justin Trudeau becomes prime minister, but he's in a an alliance with, you know, the principally the NDP government, so that the and I guess the bloc as well, the Quebec component, so that the conservatives don't get in, right? So that down, you know, that can be a good thing, but in this case, I think it's suppressing the likelihood that the NDP would be that willing to rock the boat by pointing things out. You know, it's all kind of like, oh, we're all hunkered down, we're all agreeing to the same thing. No one's looking up. No one's taking zooming out enough to see that, you know, maybe what we all agree on in this room is not what the people who are voting us in are talking about or saying is important. So that has become kind of, I think in many countries in the world, that has become like the new norm. And especially when you have media and there's state media in most countries that just goes along with like, oh yeah, this is what the government's doing. It's for, they're acting in our best interest. When it's like, even like 3 to 5 years ago, that would have been unheard of. It's like, you know, there would have been some lone voice saying, you know, poking holes in the idea. Like, is that really the best thing? In this case, for example, 2 years ago when we didn't have that much discussion about vaccines, but like there was also no real discussion about early treatments. If you remember that, it was like, where are the other treatments? Like when you go to see a doctor for something, is there only ever one treatment? You know, and is it always that extreme? Like there, for the longest time, those have been the norms. It's like there's many ways to approach a problem, and this one may work for you, but it may not work for your brother or your husband or your child.
Mhm.
And I just think that's an indicator of like where we're at. So I remain hopeful and just positive and in a good place about it, but I still think there's lots of work to do. And the fact that the main parliament in Canada is being surrounded by lots of noisy people, for me that's a positive thing. I wouldn't want to live near it. You know, I've lived in off Yonge Street with last year when there are parades going on. It can be horrible, but to be in that excitement must be incredible. You know, that much noise and energy, and it's pretty beautiful. So
We're on the other side of the country and we can feel that energy, you know, like
yeah,
that's non-locality right there, you know, like exhibit A. um so okay, I'm looking at the time. It's 10:32, and we could, as always, just keep talking, but we're going to wrap it up. So any final thoughts, Emily? What are your final thoughts before we go?
My final thoughts, let's see. I would say I think what this has done is awaken Canadians to the empowerment they already possess. And now it's time for us to put that empowerment into action. You know, we're kind of riding the high right now of this movement, but let's remember that freedom is a very fragile thing, and that we, the people, are in possession of the tools to ensure that freedom remains. And let's not offload the responsibility of defending freedom onto our government, onto the military, onto the police. It's an individual responsibility. So, whatever that looks like for you, um, I know I suggested, getting educated on the charter. Um, Very, very, it's the most important document we have. So, whatever you can do to empower yourself as a citizen of this country, and yeah, I would say just keep that in the forefront of your thinking as we move out of this. Eventually, we're going to move out of this wave. Um, yeah,
As a citizen and or resident.
yeah, or resident.
I'm looking at someone on this podcast. Honey Bunch, what are your final thoughts, words?
Did you want me to read something, or you want to go first?
Okay, well, okay, then I'll go
I just gave my final thoughts. I'm scrambling a bit, so
Okay,
yeah.
all right. Okay, no, I very much concur with what Emily just said, and I feel so excited because I remember how I felt in August when I was talking to Glenn, and just I could feel it rumbling up inside me and going like, I'm done with these tiny whispering conversations and talking to people that only agree with, and sort of like sussing out whether or not it's safe to say something and rock the boat and whatever. And I'm done walking on eggshells. And I feel like, I can't remember how many podcasts we've done since September, but I'm pretty sure every single one we have talked about the continuing, evolving COVID response, the COVID experience, the unfoldment of it all. And I know I've been feeling more and more confident in just being able to speak what I feel is true in my heart, and to remain standing on principle, and to keep questioning and keep listening, and endeavor not to judge when I am in company with people that I disagree with, or who disagree with me, or read something that I just think, come on, but to really go, okay, wait a minute, that there's some kind of validity in that, because it's come to the surface. So what is there to learn? Where is there more to understand? And I totally wholeheartedly believe, that freedom is an individual responsibility. It's great that, this trucker convoy is converging today, and it has been so visible that you could see it from a plane, and there's just no turning a blind eye or ignoring it. But this is a group who took it upon themselves to do something, to step into action. And yes, it sort of represents the feelings of a lot of people in this country and around the world. But it is up to the individual to do, like what Emily just said, do what you feel is right for you. Take action the way you feel comfortable taking it. And I would say, step out of your comfort zone and do something that is uncomfortable for you, because that's growth. That's how growth happens. If we stay within our comfort zone, if we stay within that box where everything is familiar and everything is known, there is no growth. So I'm this going live today, and then going to the rally. We've been to a few rallies already and have met some neat people. That's part of me stepping into action and continuing to have the conversation, continuing to be challenging, and continuing to just really turn to the New Thought teachings and the foundational tenets of the teachings that I am immersed in, to to move forward with just how I feel is mine to show up and mine to respond in these times, to just create the life that I really want to live, for myself, for my family, for my community. So action. I think action is just the word of the day. Like, if you want freedom, step into action and be your own hero. There's no one else who's going to do it for you. Do it yourself. So that's kind of where I'm going to end. So Honey Bunch, what do you have for us? There's no super rapid fire question round today, but there is a prize for all of us.
Okay. It's actually from the library. Jordan B. Peterson's Beyond Order, 12 More Rules for Life.
How apropos.
Which I don't always agree with his automatic default idea of, people being malevolent, innately malevolent
Oh,
in
I
some
yeah.
level. But some of the things he comes up with are amazing. So in the chapter 12, rule 12, be grateful in spite of your suffering. I think it's two short paragraphs. Uh, to be grateful for your family is to remember to treat them better. They could cease to exist at any moment. To be grateful for your friends is to awaken yourself to the necessity of treating them properly, given the comparative unlikelihood of friendship itself. To be grateful to your society is to remind yourself that you are the beneficiary of tremendous effort on the part of those who predeceased us and left this amazing framework of social structure, ritual, culture, art, technology, power, water, and sanitation so that our lives could be better than theirs. The temptation to become embittered is great and real. It requires a genuine moral effort not to take that path, assuming that you are not or are no longer naive. The gratitude associated with that state of being is predicated on ignorance and inexperience. That is not virtue. Thus, if you are attentive and awake and you can see the structure of the world, bitterness and resentment beckon as a viable response. Then you might well ask yourself, well, why not walk down that dark path? It seems to me that the answer to that, to state it again, is courage. The courage to decide, no, that is not for me. Despite the reasons I may have for being tempted in that direction, and to decide instead, despite the burden of my awake mortality, I am going to work for the good of the world. Keep on trucking.
On
Keep on
trucking.
trucking indeed. Wow. Thanks, Honey Bunch.
Okay.
Thank you, Emily, for joining us super spontaneously for today's podcast, and thank you to everyone who joined us live. It's so exciting that we had an opportunity to finally go live for the very first time, and just I am grateful. I am so grateful for this conversation. I am so grateful for all the conversations that are happening, for everyone who is stepping into action. I'm grateful for the opportunity to do whatever it is, that feels is mine to do, is ours to do. And I'm grateful for this massive up-leveling of consciousness, this awakening, this awareness that is expanding. I am grateful for the enthusiasm and for just this incredible, amazing energy that is palpable right now all across our country. And I'm grateful just to be alive and to be experiencing this. So thank you, Emily Rodgers. Thank you, Honey Bunch, Mr. Glenn Sheridan. Thank you, Dr. Dr. Jordan Peterson and the Honorable Brian Peckford for that incredible interview that we referenced so many times, available on YouTube. And I'll probably put a link in the description from this podcast so people can check it out if they haven't already. Thank you for keeping the conversation going. And thank you to everyone who engaged with us live, who is listening to us on the recording, who is watching us on the recording, however you are interacting with us. We are so grateful for your time and presence. So that's it for today. Stay tuned. Another brand spanking new episode of Who Do You Think You Are is coming up in another week or two. That's it for now. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.
Stop recording. And now I got to go onto YouTube and stop the live stream. So I think I'm just going to close it. Bye, everyone.